welcome to another edition of 5 Minutes in 1 Peter. We're going to be in 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 13 through 16 today, but we're going to start in verse 8 since this text flows together so well. So join me in verse 8 of 1 Peter 3. Finally, all of you have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. Do not repay evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, bless, for to this you were called, that you may obtain a blessing. For, and this is where he quotes Psalm 34, for whoever desires to love life and see good days, let him keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Now who is there to harm you if you are zealous for what is good? But even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled, but in your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect, having a good conscience, so that when you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ may be put to shame. And so backing up and getting out in front of this, what is Peter dealing with here? He's dealing with the context that relates to how Christians are being mistreated in the world around them. Now, that's something that's a little bit new for us who've grown up in the Western world. In the Western world, Christianity has been the majority culture here, but that is quickly passing away. And we're having to learn how to function as a minority culture and think through a biblical grid as a people who are a minority, who do not have power, who do not have control, and yet all we have is Jesus, which I think is a really good place to be. And so we're misunderstood by the world. How do we respond to that when we're misunderstood by the world? And this is where Peter uses Psalm 34. And I want to bring your attention to verse 11. He says, let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him seek peace and pursue it. And so he's using this text to call his brothers and sisters who are suffering because of their minority faith and because they look really weird and strange to the people around them. He says, here's how you respond when you feel that kind of pressure and heat and persecution around you. Seek peace and pursue it. But here's the thing. Peace doesn't just happen. Peace is something to be pursued, sought, is something to be worked at. And the environment in which peace is worked at is the local church, which is why we go back to verse 8 in this text. What does he tell them to do in learning how to be a people who know how to be zealous for peace and how to be nimble when it comes to responding in peace in hairy circumstances and in troubling circumstances? He says this, finally, all of you have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. He's teaching the people of God that in order that they may have a witness that brings glory to Jesus to the world around them, they need to practice first among themselves in being people of tenderness and brotherly love and unity of mind. It's really important that they get really good at this. And then we go to verse 13. Now, who is there to harm you if you are zealous for what is good? Now, he's not saying that if you're zealous for what is good, you're never going to be harmed. Because then he says this, but even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake. So he's giving us a general idea here that those who are zealous for good generally don't suffer at the hands of evildoers. But that's not always true. And he says there are times that could happen. You can read the book of Proverbs and see this very terminology, these ideas throughout the book of Proverbs. So he says, but even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. In other words, happy is the man who suffers for righteousness' sake. That reminds me of something that Jesus said back in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Happy is the person who is persecuted for righteousness' sake. He says, have no fear of them, of your tormentors. Have no fear of them. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled, but in your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for the reason for the hope that is in you. So he says, be prepared to give a defense. Now, a lot of people, when they read that, they feel really insecure and really inadequate because they don't know how to be theologian or professional apologists for the faith. I don't think that's what Peter is saying there. I don't think he's saying that we've got to go to seminary in order to give a good answer to people who ask us about our faith. I think we just need to be able to say why we believe in Jesus, what Jesus has done for us in saving us, and why we live for him. I think we need to all, as followers of Jesus, be able to say something like that and even practice something like that so that when we are challenged, we can respond in that light. And he says, but when you do that, make sure you do it with gentleness and respect. And then we'll end with this verse, having a good conscience. In other words, listen to that still small voice inside of yourself. Notice the condition of your heart. Observe the condition of your heart. Don't ignore your heart or suppress your conscience when your conscience is telling you to do something or deal with something or speak about something or maybe address an issue of brokenness or sin or darkness that's in your life. Make sure that you are sensitive to your conscience, having a good conscience, so that when you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior, not your bad behavior, but your good behavior in Christ, may be put to shame. How are they put to shame? Because we are people of conscience. And as we follow our conscience, even those who practice righteousness are going to be persecuted. But as we practice righteousness and obey our conscience and remain tender and sensitive to our conscience, when we are reviled, those people, sooner or later, who revile us will be put to shame. We can trust God about that. They will be put to shame when they revile your good behavior in Christ. And then he says in verse 17, for it is better to suffer for doing good, if that should be God's will, than for doing evil. I hope you'll meditate on that, absorb it, think about it. God bless you, my friends. I'll see you next week.